Chief Science Officer Kira Lin stared at her screen for the third time, running the analysis again. The results kept coming back the same, but they made no sense according to everything she knew about physics and biology. She had been studying alien species for over 20 years, and she had never seen readings like these. The human ship's fusion reactor was producing energy levels that should have been impossible with their primitive containment systems. According to the scan, they were somehow maintaining plasma temperatures of over 100 million degrees using magnetic fields that shouldn't have been strong enough. The energy output was nearly equal to a Zelkari military vessel, despite being much smaller. "This cannot be correct," she muttered, running the calculations again. But the numbers remained the same. On the new horizon, Jake was getting impatient. 2 hours had passed since they had detected the alien ship, and there had been no response to their communications. The alien vessel continued to sit motionless in space, apparently content to observe them. "Any change in their status?" he asked. "Ben?" "Nothing, sir. They're still just watching us. No movement. No communication attempts." Lisa looked up from her engineering station. "Captain, I'm detecting some kind of energy fluctuation from their ship. It's like they're running heavy computer processes or something." "Analyzing our scan. Results?" "Probably," Ryan suggested. "If I were them, I'd want to know everything about us before making contact." Dr. Ross had been thinking about the situation from a medical perspective. "You know, this could be really stressful for them, too. We might be the first humans they've ever encountered. They could be just as nervous as we are." Amy checked her weapon systems again. "Or they could be deciding the best way to destroy us." "Let's not jump to conclusions," Jake said, though he had been having similar thoughts. The prolonged silence was making everyone tense. Back on the Zephyr's edge, Kira Lin was examining the biological scan results, and these were even more disturbing than the technological data. The human crew showed bone density readings that were off the charts. Their skeletal structure was nearly 3 times denser than any known species, suggesting they had evolved under extreme gravitational conditions. The muscle fiber analysis was equally impossible. The humans possessed slow twitch and fast twitch, muscle combinations that should have been physically contradictory. Their cardiovascular systems showed redundant pathways and backup organs that made no evolutionary sense. Most shocking of all, their brains were using nearly 20% of their total energy output, far more than any intelligent species on record. These readings suggest a species that evolved under incredibly harsh conditions, she said to herself, trying to make sense of the data. But how harsh would conditions need to be to produce biology like this? She pulled up the weapons analysis that her colleague Quindar had prepared. The human ship carried what appeared to be simple kinetic projectile weapons, but the velocity calculations made her pause. According to the scan, these primitive-looking guns could accelerate metal projectiles to nearly 10% of light speed. The kinetic energy of such projectiles would be devastating to any known armor. Their defensive systems were equally puzzling. The humans appeared to be using reactive armor plating that could redirect energy weapons, combined with electromagnetic shielding that could deflect charged particle beams. For a species that appeared to be new to space travel, their defensive technology was surprisingly sophisticated. On the human ship, Danny was running routine system checks when he noticed something unusual. "Captain, I'm getting some weird readings from our navigation computer. It's like something tried to access our star charts." Jake frowned. "What kind of access?" "I'm not sure. It was very subtle, almost like a ghost in the system. If I hadn't been looking at the right moment, I would have missed it completely." Lisa ran a quick diagnostic on their computer systems. I'm not showing any unauthorized access, but Danny's right that something happened. Our security logs show a brief anomaly about an hour ago. Could the aliens have hacked our computers? Ryan asked. Maybe, Lisa replied. But if they did, they were very careful about it. They didn't leave any obvious traces. Jake didn't like the sound of that. If the aliens could access their computers remotely, they might already know everything about human technology and capabilities. The thought made him uncomfortable. Dr. Ross was monitoring the crew's biometric data when she noticed something interesting. Captain, our stress hormones are actually starting to level off. The initial spike from first contact is fading, which is normal, but I'm also detecting increased adrenaline production, which suggests our bodies are preparing for potential conflict. Evolutionary. Response? Amy asked. Probably. Humans are wired to be cautious around unknown threats, even when our conscious minds are trying to stay calm. On the Zelkari ship, Kira Lynn was now examining the navigation data they had quietly extracted from the human computer systems. What she found there made her blood run cold. The human ship had originated from a star system designated Sol 3 in their database, a system that Zelkari scouts had surveyed and classified as completely uninhabitable. She pulled up the environmental data for Sol 3 and felt her breathing apparatus struggle to process what she was seeing. The planet had a surface gravity of 9.8 meters per second squared, nearly 3 times galactic standard. The atmosphere contained 21% oxygen, a highly reactive gas that was toxic to most known life forms. Surface temperatures ranged from -40 to +50 degrees on the standard scale, with extreme weather patterns that included violent storms and seismic activity. Most terrifying of all, the planet orbited dangerously close to a G-type star that bombarded the surface, with radiation levels that would be lethal to most species. According to Zelkari classification systems, Sol 3 was a death world where nothing should be able to evolve beyond simple bacterial life. But they came from there, she whispered, looking at the biological scan results with new understanding. They evolved on a death world. Everything suddenly made sense. The impossible bone density was an adaptation to crushing gravity. The redundant organs were backup systems for surviving in a hostile environment. The reactive muscle fibers were designed for rapid response to multiple types of threats. The humans weren't just another spacefaring species. They were the products of one of the most hostile environments in the galaxy. She activated her communication link to Fleet Commander Vextal. "Commander, I need to speak with you immediately. The scan results are unprecedented." "What did you find?" Vextal asked. "Sir, I believe we may have encountered the most dangerous species in galactic history. I need to show you this data in person." Jake was starting to worry about the continued silence from the alien ship. Standard first contact protocols suggested that initial communication should begin within 4 hours of detection. They were approaching that deadline, and the aliens showed no signs of responding to their repeated greeting messages. "Maybe we should try a different approach," Ben suggested. "What if we send them some basic information about ourselves? Show them we're peaceful explorers, not military." "That could work," Jake said. "But it could also give them information they might use against us if their intentions aren't friendly." Amy was checking her tactical displays when she noticed something concerning. "Captain, their ship has been slowly adjusting its position. They're not moving toward us, but they're definitely changing their angle relative to our position." "Weapons. Positioning?" Ryan asked. "Hard to tell. Could be defensive positioning, could be offensive. Either way, they're definitely maneuvering." Jake made a decision. "Ben, prepare a basic information package about Earth and humanity. Include our peaceful intentions and our desire for friendly contact, but keep the technical details minimal. Yes, sir. As Ben worked on the message, none of the human crew realized that their mere existence had already provided the aliens with more terrifying information than any communication could convey. The Zelkari were beginning to understand that they had encountered something far beyond their worst nightmares. Apex predators from a world that should have killed them long before they developed intelligence. The stars looked different from this far out in space. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the New Horizon, watching the view screen show empty space dotted with distant lights. His ship had been traveling for 3 months now, mapping new star systems and looking for planets that might support life. It was quiet work, but Jake liked it that way. "Captain, we're getting something on sensors," said Ben Parker from his communications station. The young officer had been with the crew for 2 years now, and Jake trusted his skills. "It's big, sir. Really big." Jake moved to look at Ben's screen. The readings showed a massive object about 50,000 kilometers away. It was clearly artificial, with smooth curves and what looked like weapon ports along its hull. The ship was at least 3 times the size of the New Horizon. "Any communication attempts?" Jake asked. "Nothing yet, sir. They're just sitting there watching us." Jake felt his stomach tighten. First contact with an alien species was something every deep space captain thought about, but most never expected to actually experience. The training simulations could only prepare you so much for the real thing. "Lisa, are our systems running?" "Normally," he called to engineer Lisa Grant, who was checking her control panel. "Everything looks good, Captain. All systems are green across the board." Jake nodded. "Danny, keep us steady. Don't make any sudden moves." Pilot Danny Brooks adjusted their position slightly. "Yes, sir. We're holding position. On the alien ship." Zephyr's Edge Fleet Commander Vextal studied the strange vessel that had appeared in their scanning range. The ship looked primitive compared to Zelkari technology, with rough metal plating and simple geometric designs. It was much smaller than their vessels, but Vextal knew that size could be deceiving. "Begin the standard first contact scan," Vextal ordered. "I want to know everything about that ship and its crew." Chief Science Officer Kira Lynn activated the Deep Quantum Scanning Array. The invisible beams reached out across space, penetrating the human ship's hull and analyzing every system. Inside, the scan would tell them about the aliens' technology level, their weapons, their biology, and their intentions. It was a routine procedure that the Zelkari had performed hundreds of times with other species. "Scan is active, Commander," Kira Lynn reported. "We should have full results in approximately 10 minutes. Back on the New Horizon, Jake was discussing options with his senior staff. Security Chief Ryan Hayes had joined them on the bridge, along with Dr. Helen Ross and Marine Sergeant Amy Collins. The crew was small but experienced, and Jake valued their input. "What's our protocol here, Captain?" Ryan asked. "The manual says to maintain peaceful intentions but be ready for anything." "I know what the manual says," Jake replied, "but manuals can't prepare you for this. We're looking at genuine alien technology here." Dr. Ross was studying the readings from her medical sensors. "I'm not detecting any biological signatures from their ship, but that could just mean their biology is too different for our equipment to recognize." Amy Collins checked her weapons status display. "All defensive systems are ready, Captain. If they try anything hostile, we can respond." Jake hoped it wouldn't come to that. Humanity had been dreaming of meeting alien life for centuries, and he didn't want their first contact to end in violence, but he also knew that his first responsibility was to protect his crew and ship. "Ben, Try broadcasting a standard greeting message on all frequencies, Jake ordered. Mathematical sequences, basic universal concepts, peaceful intentions. The works. Already working on it, sir, Ben replied, his fingers moving quickly over his console. On the Zelkari ship, communication specialist Texmore detected the human transmission and analyzed it quickly. The signal contained simple mathematical progressions, and what appeared to be attempts at establishing common ground for communication. It was exactly what they expected from a species making first contact. "They're trying to communicate, Commander," Texmore reported. "Standard mathematical greeting. Patterns. Ignore it for now," Vextal ordered. "Let the scan finish first. I want to know what we're dealing with before we make any response." The Zelkari had learned from experience to be cautious with new species. Some were peaceful, some were aggressive, and some were unpredictable. The quantum scan would tell them which category these aliens fell into, and then they could decide on the appropriate response. Kira Lynn watched the scan data flowing across her screens. The alien ship used some kind of fusion reaction for power, which was primitive but functional. Their computer systems appeared to be electronic rather than quantum-based, suggesting a lower level of technological development. Everything seemed normal for a species that had just developed interstellar travel. Jake paced the bridge while they waited for some kind of response from the alien ship. Minutes passed without any reply to their greeting. The alien vessel just sat there, apparently, studying them just as intensely as they were studying it. "Maybe they need time to decode our message," suggested Danny from the pilot's seat. "Or maybe they're deciding whether we're worth talking to," Amy said grimly. "Let's stay positive," Jake said, though he was feeling increasingly uneasy about the situation. The alien ship's silence was starting to feel ominous rather than cautious. Dr. Ross was monitoring the crew's stress levels through the ship's medical sensors. "Everyone's adrenaline is elevated, but that's normal for a first contact situation. No one's in immediate medical distress." "Good," Jake said. "Lisa, any changes in their energy output or movement?" "They're definitely scanning us with something," Lisa reported. "I'm detecting some kind of high-energy beam directed at our hull. It's not damaging anything, but it's definitely examining our ship." Jake frowned. A deep scan could reveal a lot about their capabilities, but it could also be seen as an aggressive act. He decided to give the aliens the benefit of the doubt for now. On the Zephyr's edge, the scan was nearing completion. Kira Lynn began receiving the final data packets, and what she saw made her pause. Some of the readings didn't make sense. The power output from the human ship's fusion reactor was higher than should be possible with their apparent technology level. Their defensive systems showed unusual patterns that her analysis programs couldn't categorize properly. "Commander, I'm getting some irregular readings," she reported. "The scan is complete, but I need time to analyze the data properly." "How long?" Vextal asked. "Give me 1 hour to run full analysis protocols." Vextal nodded. "Very well. Continue monitoring their ship, but take no action until I have your complete report." Neither crew knew that this routine first contact scan was about to change everything. The data flowing through Zelkari computers would soon reveal truths about humanity that would terrify an entire alien civilization. Xenobiologist Thexmore had spent his entire career studying alien life forms across the galaxy. He had examined species that lived in methane clouds, creatures that survived in the vacuum of space, and organisms that thrived near the cores of stars. But nothing in his experience had prepared him for what he was seeing in the human ship's navigation database. The data showed a complete star chart mapping the humans' journey from their home system to this location. Their origin point was a yellow star system that Zelkari databases had designated as Survey Zone 47291. Thexmore remembered that survey. It had been conducted 50 years ago, and the entire system had been classified as unsuitable for any form of complex life. He pulled up the original survey data and cross-referenced it with the human navigation files. The coordinates matched perfectly. The humans had come from Sol 3, a planet that every Zelkari scientist agreed was a deathworld. Thexmore studied the environmental readings with growing horror. Sol 3 had a gravity well that would crush most galactic species within minutes. The atmospheric composition was dominated by nitrogen and oxygen, two gases that formed explosive combinations under pressure. The oxygen alone would be toxic to most life forms, causing rapid cellular damage through oxidation. The temperature variations were extreme, ranging from conditions that would freeze most biological fluids to heat levels that would denature essential proteins. The planet experienced regular seismic activity that would demolish most structures, and the weather patterns included rotating storm systems with wind speeds that could tear apart unprotected organisms. "This is impossible," he muttered, checking the data again. Nothing could evolve intelligence under these conditions. But the humans had done more than just evolve intelligence. According to their navigation records, they had developed technology, built civilizations, and eventually achieved space travel. They had taken a world that should have been barren rock and turned it into a thriving biosphere. On the New Horizon, Jake was reviewing the ship's daily reports when Amy brought him something concerning. "Captain, I've been analyzing the alien ship's positioning, and I think they might be preparing to leave." "What makes you say that?" "Their orientation has changed significantly over the past hour. They're now pointing away from us and toward open space. It's exactly the position you'd take if you wanted to make a quick departure." Jake frowned. "Maybe they're just being cautious. We might look just as threatening to them as they do to us." Dr. Ross was monitoring the crew's psychological state and had noticed some interesting patterns. "Captain, I'm seeing elevated stress, responses across the crew, but not the kind I'd expect from fear. It's more like the stress patterns we see before important missions or difficult challenges." "What does that mean?" Danny asked from his pilot station. "It means our bodies are preparing for action, even though our minds are trying to stay calm. It's an adaptive response that humans developed for dealing with uncertain situations." Lisa was running continuous scans of the alien vessel when she detected something new. "Captain, their energy output just spiked dramatically. Whatever they were doing with their computers, they just ramped it up significantly." "Could be running complex analysis programs," Ben suggested. "Maybe they're trying to understand our technology. Or planning their next move," Ryan added grimly. Back on the Zephyr's edge, Thexmore was diving deeper into the environmental data from Sol 3. The more he learned, the more terrified he became. The planet's magnetic field was weak and unstable, allowing deadly radiation from their star to bombard the surface regularly. The orbital mechanics were chaotic, with a large moon that caused extreme tidal forces and a tilted rotational axis that created severe seasonal variations. The geological data was equally disturbing. Sol 3 showed evidence of massive extinction events throughout its history. Asteroid impacts, volcanic eruptions, ice ages, and atmospheric changes that had wiped out most life forms multiple times. Yet somehow, life had not only survived these catastrophes, but had grown stronger and more adaptable with each event. The selection pressure must have been incredible, he realized. Only the most resilient, adaptable, and aggressive species would have survived to reproduce. He pulled up the biological scan data that Kira Lin had shared with him and began to understand the connection. The humans' redundant organ systems weren't just biological curiosities. They were backup life support systems designed to function even when the primary organs failed. Their dense bone structure wasn't just strong. It was built to withstand impacts that would shatter normal skeletons. Their muscle fiber composition was optimized for both endurance and explosive power, exactly what you'd need to survive in an environment where threats could come from any direction at any time. Their brain structure showed enlarged regions associated with pattern recognition, threat assessment, and rapid decision-making under stress. "They're not just intelligent," he whispered. "They're predators, apex predators from a death world." On the human ship, Jake was getting ready to try a different approach to communication when Ben detected something unexpected. "Captain, I'm receiving a very faint transmission from the alien ship. It's not directed at us. It looks like they're broadcasting to somewhere else. Can you decode it?" "I'm trying, but the encryption is incredibly complex. It would take our computers days to break it, assuming we could break it at all." Amy was studying her tactical display when she noticed something alarming. "Captain, that transmission is using a lot of power. If I didn't know better, I'd say they were calling for backup." Jake felt his stomach drop. How long would it take for reinforcements to arrive if they are calling for help? "Depends on how far away they are and how fast their ships can travel," Ryan replied. "Could be hours, could be days." Dr. Ross was monitoring the conversation and offered her perspective. "You know, if we just encountered an alien species for the first time, wouldn't we want to report it to our government? Maybe that's all they're doing, letting their people know they found us." "Maybe," Jake said, but he wasn't convinced. Something about the aliens' behavior felt off. The prolonged scanning, the lack of communication, and now the mysterious transmission all suggested they were dealing with something more complex than simple first contact protocols. Thexmore was now examining the human ship's structural design and finding more evidence of their deathworld origins. The hull plating was designed to withstand impacts from high-velocity debris, exactly what you'd need for a species that had evolved dodging asteroid fragments and volcanic projectiles. The internal compartments were heavily reinforced and could be sealed independently, suggesting the humans expected their ships to take damage and keep functioning. Even their technology showed signs of their hostile environment origins. Their computers used hardened components that could function despite radiation exposure. Their life support systems had multiple backup layers and could recycle resources with incredible efficiency. Everything about the human ship screamed of a species that had learned to survive by being tougher, smarter, and more prepared than anything that tried to kill them. "Commander Vextal," he called through the communication system, "I need to speak with you immediately about the human homeworld data." "What did you find?" Vextal's voice came back. "Sir, these humans didn't just evolve on a death world. They conquered it. They took one of the most hostile environments in the galaxy and made it their home. The evolutionary pressure that created them is beyond anything we've encountered before." "Explain." "Sir, imagine a world where everything is trying to kill you from the moment you're born. Crushing gravity, toxic atmosphere, deadly radiation, extreme weather, geological instability, and periodic mass extinction events. Then imagine a species that not only survived all of that, but thrived and eventually developed the technology to leave that world and explore space. There was a long pause before Vextal responded. "Are you saying these humans are dangerous?" "Sir, I'm saying these humans are the most dangerous species the galaxy has ever produced. They're the survivors of evolutionary warfare that lasted millions of years. Everything about them is designed for survival in impossible conditions." On the New Horizon, Jake made a decision. "Ben, send them our prepared message. Include basic information about Earth and humanity, but emphasize our peaceful intentions. Maybe if they know more about us, they'll be willing to communicate." Transmitting. "Now, sir." As the human message traveled across space toward the Zelkari ship, neither side realized that the information it contained would only confirm the aliens' worst fears about what they had discovered. Weapons analyst Quindar had been studying military technology for 30 years, analyzing the combat capabilities of dozens of alien species across the galaxy. He thought he had seen every possible approach to warfare, from energy weapons to exotic matter manipulators. But the human arsenal was unlike anything in his experience, and the more he studied it, the more concerned he became. At first glance, the human weapons seemed primitive. They used chemical explosives to propel metal, projectiles, a technology that most galactic civilizations had abandoned thousands of years ago in favor of energy-based systems. But when Quindar analyzed the performance specifications, he realized that primitive didn't mean ineffective. The humans had perfected kinetic warfare to a terrifying degree. Their handheld weapons could accelerate projectiles to velocities that would punch through any personal armor he knew of. The metal slugs were designed to expand on impact, creating massive wound channels that would incapacitate most organic targets instantly. But it was their ship-mounted weapons that truly concerned him. The New Horizon carried what the humans called railguns, electromagnetic launchers that could accelerate solid projectiles to significant fractions of light speed. At those velocities, even small projectiles carried enormous kinetic energy. A single shot could devastate a ship the size of the Zephyr's Edge. "These calculations cannot be correct," he muttered, running the analysis program again. But the numbers remained the same. The human kinetic weapons delivered more destructive force per shot than most Zelkari energy weapons, and they did it using simple physics that was almost impossible to defend against. On the New Horizon, Security Chief Ryan, Hayes was conducting his daily weapons inspection when Jake joined him in the armory. The captain wanted to understand their defensive capabilities in case the alien encounter turned hostile. "What's our status if things go bad?" Jake asked, looking at the rack of assault rifles and the larger ship-mounted systems. "We're in good shape, Captain," Ryan replied, checking the ammunition inventory. "All personal weapons are functional, and our railgun systems are operating at full capacity. We've got enough ammunition for an extended engagement if necessary." Jake picked up one of the rifles and examined it. The weapon felt solid and reliable in his hands, designed for function rather than appearance. "These projectiles can really penetrate alien armor. These rounds are designed to punch through anything short of a battleship's hull plating," Ryan explained. "The core is dense metal surrounded by an expanding jacket. On impact, the jacket spreads out to create maximum tissue damage while the core continues to penetrate." Amy Collins joined them in the armory, having just finished her training, routine in the ship's small gym. "Captain, is there something I should know about our alien friends?" "Just want to be prepared," Jake replied. "They've been awfully quiet for a first contact situation." Amy nodded and began checking her personal sidearm. You know, Captain, if they've been scanning us like Lisa thinks, they probably already know about our weapons. Might make them more cautious about trying anything aggressive. Back on the Zelkari ship, Quindar was discovering that the humans' approach to warfare went far beyond simple weapons. Their entire military philosophy seemed based on the concept of overwhelming force and redundant systems. Every weapon had a backup. Every backup had a backup, and every system was designed to keep fighting even when heavily damaged. The humans carried 3 different types of handheld weapons, each optimized for different combat scenarios. They had close-quarters weapons for ship-to-ship boarding actions, medium-range weapons for general combat, and long-range weapons for precision strikes. All of them used the same basic kinetic principle, but applied it in different ways. Their ammunition was equally sophisticated. Standard rounds for general use, armor-piercing rounds for hardened targets, explosive rounds for area effects, and specialty rounds designed for specific tactical situations. The humans had apparently spent considerable time thinking about how to kill things efficiently. But this is just their exploration ship, Quindar realized with growing alarm. If this is what they carry for peaceful missions, what do their military vessels look like? He began analyzing the structural data from the human ship, looking for clues about their military capabilities. What he found was disturbing. The New Horizon was clearly designed as a civilian vessel, but it incorporated military-grade armor and defensive systems. The hull could withstand impacts that would disable most civilian ships, and the internal compartments could be sealed to prevent catastrophic decompression. Most telling of all, the ship's design included multiple redundant systems and damage control capabilities that suggested the humans expected their civilian vessels to come under attack and continue operating. This wasn't the design philosophy of a peaceful species. This was the approach of a civilization that had learned to survive in a hostile universe. On the human ship, Dr. Helen Ross was reviewing the crew's medical files when she noticed something that might be relevant to their current situation. Captain, I've been thinking about how our physiology might appear to aliens who scan us. What do you mean? Jake asked. Well, human biology is pretty unusual when you think about it objectively. We have redundant organs, incredibly dense bones, and muscle structures that can generate enormous force relative to our body size. To an alien species that evolved under gentler conditions, we might look like walking weapons. Danny looked up from his pilot console. Are you saying we might be scaring them just by existing? It's possible. Our cardiovascular system alone is designed to function under extreme stress. Our fight-or-flight response floods our bodies with chemicals that enhance our physical capabilities. To species that didn't evolve those traits, we might seem incredibly dangerous. Lisa was monitoring their fusion reactor when she detected another energy spike from the alien ship. Captain, they just increased their power output again. Their engines are now at what looks like standby levels for departure. Are they getting ready to leave? Ben asked. Either that, or they're preparing for combat, Amy said grimly. High power output could mean they're charging weapon systems. Jake made a decision. Ryan, have all crew members report to their stations. Don't activate any weapons, but I want everyone ready in case things go bad quickly. Back on the Zephyrs, Edge, Quindar was completing his analysis of human military capabilities, and the results were terrifying. These weren't just weapons. They were the tools of a species that had been fighting for survival since the beginning of their evolution. Every aspect of their technology showed signs of being tested in actual combat situations. Their projectile weapons were designed for reliability under extreme conditions. Their armor was built to protect against multiple types of threats simultaneously. Their tactics, based on the training manuals they had found in the ship's database, emphasized rapid response, overwhelming force, and adaptability to changing battlefield conditions. Most disturbing of all, the humans seemed to view combat as a normal part of existence. Their entertainment media was filled with stories of warfare, their historical records documented thousands of conflicts, and their training procedures assumed that violence was an inevitable part of life. "Commander Vextal," he called through the communication system. "I have completed my weapons analysis of the human vessel." "What are your findings?" Vextal responded. "Sir, these humans are not just capable of violence, they are optimized for it. Their weapons technology is primitive, by our standards, but incredibly effective. Their tactical doctrine is based on principles that have been tested in actual warfare, and their entire approach to conflict assumes that they will face opponents who are trying to kill them." "Are you saying they're a military threat?" "Sir, I'm saying they're a species that has turned warfare into an art form. They don't just fight to win, they fight to completely destroy anything that threatens them. Their concept of proportional response appears to be use enough force to ensure the threat never returns." Quindar paused, looking at the final summary of his analysis. "Commander, if these humans ever decided to expand their territory through military conquest, I don't believe any current galactic civilization could stop them. They have the tools, the training, and most importantly, the mindset of apex predators." On the New Horizon, Jake was reviewing their situation when Ben detected something new. "Captain, I'm receiving another transmission from the alien ship. This one is much stronger than the last one, and it's definitely not aimed at us." "Same destination as before?" "Hard to tell, but the power level suggests they're trying to reach someone very far away. This could be a fleet-wide alert." Jake felt the weight of command settling on his shoulders. If the aliens were calling for military support, the New Horizon might soon find itself facing odds that no amount of preparation could overcome. But he also knew that showing weakness or fear could be just as dangerous as appearing aggressive. "All hands, remain at stations," he announced over the ship's communication system. "Continue normal operations, but be ready for rapid response to changing situations." Neither side realized that the humans' reputation as warriors was about to spread far beyond this single encounter, carried by alien transmissions to every corner of the galaxy. Cultural analyst Murthon had always enjoyed studying alien civilizations. Each species had unique approaches to art, philosophy, and social organization that provided fascinating insights into different ways of thinking. But as he delved into the human cultural database, he began to feel something he had never experienced before while studying an alien culture: genuine fear. The humans had provided access to their entertainment library as part of their peaceful communication attempt, probably thinking it would help the aliens understand their culture better. Murthon started with what appeared to be historical records, hoping to understand how human civilization had developed. What he found instead was an unbroken chain of warfare stretching back thousands of years. The humans documented their conflicts with disturbing detail and apparent pride. They had fought wars over territory, resources, ideology, religion, and sometimes for reasons that seemed completely incomprehensible to galactic standards. But what truly alarmed Murthon was that they didn't seem to view this constant warfare as a tragedy. They treated it as a normal part of their existence. Their historical records contained detailed accounts of battles, strategies, and military leaders who were remembered as heroes. They studied their wars, analyzed their mistakes, and used the lessons learned to become more effective in future conflicts. The humans had turned the act of killing other humans into a science that they refined over millennia. On the New Horizon, Captain Jake Morrison was reviewing the ship's entertainment database with Ben Parker, trying to select cultural materials that would present humanity in the best possible light for any alien contact. They wanted to show that humans were creative, intelligent, and peaceful explorers rather than the aggressive species that some of their history might suggest. "What about our music?" Ben suggested. "Classical compositions, folk songs from different cultures, maybe some of the space exploration anthems from the early colonies?" "Good idea," Jake replied. "Music is supposed to be universal, and avoid anything too aggressive or militaristic. I'll also include some art galleries, literature, and documentary films about human achievements in science and exploration," Ben added. Dr. Ross joined their discussion from the medical bay. "You might want to include some information about human medicine and our approach to healing. That could show them we care about preserving life, not just taking it." "Excellent point," Jake said. "Include medical research, humanitarian efforts, disaster relief operations. Show them the cooperative side of human nature." Back on the Zelkari ship, Murthon was discovering that human entertainment reflected their warrior culture in disturbing ways. Their movies celebrated violence and conflict, their books glorified military heroes, and their games simulated combat scenarios with incredible detail and realism. Even their sports were often ritualized forms of combat or competition. The humans seemed to find entertainment in scenarios that would be considered horror by most galactic species. They created fictional stories about surviving impossible odds, fighting overwhelming enemies, and enduring extreme hardship. Their heroes were usually individuals who could inflict violence more effectively than their opponents. Most disturbing of all, the humans appeared to use their entertainment as training material. Their military simulation games were so realistic that they could serve as actual combat training. Their action movies demonstrated tactics and techniques that could be applied in real warfare. Even their children's games often involved elements of conflict, competition, and strategic thinking. "They're teaching their young to be warriors," Murthon realized with growing alarm. "From the earliest age, they're preparing them for conflict." He pulled up human educational materials and found his fears confirmed. Human children learned about military history alongside mathematics and science. They studied famous battles, analyzed military strategies, and were taught to admire warriors and military leaders. Physical education emphasized competition and overcoming challenges through force and determination. On the human ship, Amy Collins was conducting her daily training routine in the ship's small gymnasium when Danny Brooks stopped by to check on the exercise equipment. Amy was working through a series of combat drills that were standard for all military personnel, but Danny found them fascinating from a pilot's perspective. "Those moves look pretty intense," Danny commented, watching Amy practice close quarters. "Combat techniques, just staying sharp," Amy replied, wiping sweat from her forehead. "You never know when you might need to handle a boarding situation or hostile environment. Do you really think we might face combat out here?" Amy paused in her training. "Danny, space is dangerous. Equipment fails, people make mistakes, and sometimes you encounter hostiles. The universe doesn't care about your peaceful intentions. It only respects your ability to survive." Lisa Grant was passing by and overheard their conversation. "That's a pretty grim worldview," she said. "It's a realistic worldview," Amy corrected. "Humans didn't become the dominant species on Earth by being optimistic. We survived by being prepared for the worst and hoping for the best. Back on the Zelkari vessel," Murthon was analyzing human philosophical and religious texts, hoping to find evidence of a more peaceful nature beneath their warrior culture. Instead, he found belief systems that had been shaped by constant conflict and struggle. Human religions spoke of spiritual warfare, eternal battles between good and evil, and the need to fight for their beliefs. Their philosophies emphasized concepts like survival of the fittest, strength through adversity, and peace through superior firepower. Even their most peaceful ideologies acknowledged that violence was sometimes necessary to protect the innocent or defend important principles. The humans had developed complex ethical frameworks around the use of force, but these frameworks assumed that force would be necessary. They had rules for when it was acceptable to kill, guidelines for minimizing civilian casualties, and protocols for post-conflict reconstruction. They had turned warfare into a professional discipline with its own moral code. "They've weaponized ethics," Murthon whispered in horror. "They've created moral justifications for any level of violence they might need to use." He began examining human literature and found stories that celebrated the warrior spirit in all its forms. Heroes who sacrificed themselves for their comrades, leaders who made impossible decisions to save their people, and ordinary individuals who found extraordinary strength when faced with overwhelming odds. The humans didn't just tolerate violence, they found nobility and meaning in it. On the New Horizon, Jake was discussing their situation with his senior staff when Ryan Hayes brought up something that had been bothering him. "Captain, I've been thinking about how long they've been scanning us. Most first contact protocols call for initial communication within a few hours. We're well past that point." "Maybe they need more time to understand our technology," Ben suggested. "Or maybe they're trying to decide whether we're a threat," Ryan replied. "If I encountered an alien species, I'd want to know everything about their capabilities before I made contact." Dr. Ross was monitoring the crew's stress levels and noted some interesting patterns. "You know, our psychological profiles probably look very unusual to alien observers. Human stress responses are designed for combat situations. We produce chemicals that enhance our physical capabilities, sharpen our reflexes, and increase our pain tolerance." "What does that mean?" Danny asked. "It means that under stress, humans literally become more dangerous. Our biology is designed to make us better fighters when we're threatened. To aliens who didn't evolve that way, we might seem like we're always preparing for battle." Amy nodded in agreement. "She's right. Human combat conditioning is based on controlled stress responses. We train our soldiers to function better under pressure, not worse. That's not normal behavior for most species." Back on the Zephyr's edge, Murthon was completing his cultural analysis, and the conclusions were terrifying. The humans weren't just a warrior species, they were a civilization that had turned conflict into an art form, a science, and a core part of their identity. They had spent thousands of years perfecting the ability to fight and win against impossible odds. Their culture celebrated strength, courage, and the willingness to use violence in defense of their values. Their entertainment reinforced these themes, their education system prepared their young for conflict, and their philosophy provided moral justification for any level of force necessary to achieve their goals. Most frightening of all, they had developed the concept of total war, the idea that in extreme situations, every resource of a civilization should be devoted to destroying the enemy. The humans had demonstrated this principle in their own history, completely mobilizing their entire species for warfare when they felt it was necessary. "Commander Vextal," he called through the communication system, "I have completed my cultural analysis of the human species. "What did you discover?" Vextal asked. "Sir, these humans are not just warriors by necessity, they are warriors by choice. Their entire civilization is built around the concept of struggle, conflict, and the use of force to achieve objectives. They have turned violence into a cultural value that they pass down to each generation." Behavioral specialist Rylketh had studied the social dynamics of hundreds of alien species throughout his career. He understood hive minds, solitary hunters, territorial competitors, and symbiotic partnerships. But the human-crew interactions he was observing through their communication intercepts were unlike anything in his extensive database. Most intelligent species formed alliances based on mutual benefit, genetic relationships, or hierarchical dominance structures. The humans seemed to operate on a completely different principle. They had formed emotional bonds with individuals who shared no genetic connection and offered no obvious material advantage. Yet these bonds appeared to be stronger than family ties in most other species. Rylketh watched as the human called Amy Collins submitted to medical treatment from Dr. Helen Ross for what appeared to be a minor training injury. The interaction was fascinating because it demonstrated multiple behavioral patterns that shouldn't exist together. Dr. Ross showed genuine concern for Amy's welfare, despite the injury being minor and non-threatening. Amy displayed complete trust in the doctor's abilities and judgment, allowing potentially vulnerable positioning during treatment. Most remarkably, their conversation included casual references to sacrificing themselves for other crew members, as if this was a normal and expected behavior. "I'd take a bullet for any of you guys," Amy said while the doctor examined her injured shoulder. "That's what we do. We watch each other's backs." "And we'd do the same for you," Dr. Ross replied. "That's what makes us a crew instead of just individuals sharing a ship." On the New Horizon, the crew was going about their normal duties, unaware that their casual interactions were causing profound confusion among their alien observers. The bonds between crew members had developed naturally over months of working together in the isolated environment of deep space. Jake Morrison was reviewing navigation reports with Danny Brooks when Lisa Grant joined them to discuss some minor modifications to the ship's power distribution system. The conversation was purely technical, but it demonstrated the easy cooperation that had developed between crew members from different departments. "The reactor efficiency is up 3% since we implemented your routing suggestions," Lisa told Danny. "Your pilot instincts about power management were right on target." "Just trying to squeeze every bit of performance out of our systems," Danny replied. "Never know when we might need that extra power." Jake watched the interaction with satisfaction. His crew had developed the kind of mutual trust and cooperation that made long-duration missions possible. Each member brought unique skills to the team, but more importantly, they had learned to think as a unit rather than as individuals. Back on the Zelkari ship, Rylketh was analyzing the human command structure and finding patterns that defied conventional wisdom about leadership hierarchies. Captain Morrison held ultimate authority, but he regularly sought input from subordinates and sometimes deferred to their expertise in specialized areas. The crew members showed respect for Morrison's position, but they also demonstrated personal loyalty that went beyond mere military discipline. They followed his orders not just because he outranked them, but because they trusted his judgment and believed he would make decisions in their best interests. Most puzzling of all, the humans seemed to view their crew relationships as permanent rather than temporary. They spoke about their obligations to each other in terms that suggested these bonds would continue even after their current mission ended. This was completely contrary to most species' approach to group dynamics. They're not just working together. Rilketh realized. They formed a permanent social unit. He began examining human biological responses during social interactions and found even more unusual patterns. When crew members helped each other or received assistance, their stress hormones decreased and their pleasure response systems activated. The humans were literally biochemically rewarded for cooperative behavior. Their communication patterns showed constant reinforcement of group identity and mutual support. They used humor to reduce tension, shared personal information to build trust, and regularly engaged in activities that served no purpose other than strengthening social bonds. On the human ship, Ben Parker and Ryan Hayes were discussing their families back on Earth while monitoring their respective stations. It was the kind of casual conversation that helped pass time during long duty shifts, but it also served to remind them of what they were working to protect. "My daughter should be starting school about now," Ben said, checking the Earth calendar on his screen. "I'm missing her first day. But she understood that this mission was important." "That's rough," Ryan replied. "How do you deal with being away from family for so long?" "You focus on the people who are here with you. The crew becomes your temporary family, and you do everything you can to make sure everyone gets home safely." Ryan nodded in understanding. "Yeah, I feel the same way. We're all in this together, and we all go home together. That's the rule." Amy Collins was passing by and heard their conversation. "Damn right that's the rule. Nobody gets left behind, nobody gets forgotten. We look out for each other because that's what families do." Back on the Zelkari vessel, Rilketh was discovering that human pack bonding went far beyond simple cooperation. The crew members had developed what could only be described as a kinship group that transcended biological relationships. They had created artificial family bonds that were reinforced by shared experiences, mutual dependence, and conscious choice. The implications were staggering. If humans could form these kinds of emotional attachments to unrelated individuals, they could potentially create alliance networks that spanned entire star systems. Their loyalty wouldn't be limited to genetic relatives or political entities. They could bond with anyone who shared their values and objectives. "This explains their military effectiveness," he muttered, reviewing historical data about human warfare. "They don't just fight for territory or resources, they fight for each other." Human military units showed casualty rates that were much lower than statistical models predicted, not because they were better protected, but because they worked harder to keep each other alive. Soldiers would take enormous personal risks to rescue wounded comrades, and entire units would fight to the death rather than abandon fallen members. On the New Horizon, Dr. Ross was conducting her weekly crew health assessment when she noticed something that reinforced her understanding of human psychology. "You know, Captain, our stress levels as a group are actually lower than they would be for individuals facing this situation alone." "What do you mean?" Jake asked. "Humans are social creatures. We handle stress better when we're part of a cohesive group. The crew bonds we've formed aren't just nice to have. They're essential for psychological health during long missions." Lisa looked up from her engineering console. "It's like having a support network that you can count on no matter what happens. Knowing that everyone else has your back makes you stronger." "And more willing to take risks," Amy added. "When you know your team will come for you if things go wrong, you're more likely to do what needs to be done." Back on the Zephyr's edge, Rilketh was completing his analysis of human pack bonding behavior, and the results were deeply disturbing from a military perspective. The humans had somehow evolved a social structure that combined individual initiative, with group cohesion in ways that maximized both personal effectiveness and collective strength. Their pack bonds meant that attacking one human effectively meant attacking all humans in their social group. Their loyalty networks could potentially span entire populations, creating a species-wide commitment to mutual defense that would be almost impossible to break through conventional military action. "Commander Vextel," he called through the communication system. "I have completed my behavioral analysis of the human crew." "What are your findings?" Vextal asked. "Sir, these humans have formed social bonds that are stronger than family relationships in most species. They demonstrate pack loyalty that extends beyond genetic connections to include chosen group members. This creates military unit cohesion that far exceeds normal parameters." "Explain the implications." "Sir, if humans can form these kinds of emotional attachments to crew members, they can probably form similar bonds with entire populations. An attack on human civilians wouldn't just be an attack on non-combatants. It would be an attack on the extended family of every human military unit." Rilketh paused, considering the full implications of his analysis. "Commander, human pack bonding behavior suggests that they would view any threat to their civilization as a personal attack on their family members. They wouldn't just defend their territory. They would fight with the emotional intensity of parents protecting their children. Are you saying they would be difficult to defeat?" "Sir, I'm saying they would be impossible to defeat through conventional means. You can't break pack bonds through intimidation, and you can't demoralize humans by threatening their group members. If anything, threats to their pack would only make them fight harder." Rilketh looked at his final analysis summary with growing concern. "Commander, these humans have turned emotional attachment into a military advantage. They're not just warriors. They're warriors who fight for love." Military strategist Yexapol had spent 40 years studying warfare across the galaxy. He had analyzed the tactics of aggressive species, defensive civilizations, and everything in between. He had developed strategies for dealing with hive minds, individual hunters, and collective consciousness entities. But as he ran combat simulations involving the human ship, he began to understand that all of his experience might be worthless against this new threat. The initial simulations had seemed routine. A single human exploration vessel against a Zelkari. Military ship should have been a straightforward analysis. Superior technology, better weapons, overwhelming firepower advantage. The outcome should have been obvious. But when Yexapol factored in the human capabilities that his colleagues had discovered, the simulation results became increasingly disturbing. The humans' deathworld origin meant they could function in environments that would disable or kill most Zelkari troops. Their pack-bonding behavior meant they would fight with coordination and determination that exceeded normal military parameters. Their cultural emphasis on warfare meant they would use tactics that other species would consider extreme or unthinkable. But it was their adaptability that truly concerned him. The simulation showed that humans could modify their strategies in real time based on changing battlefield conditions. They didn't just follow predetermined battle plans. They improvised, adapted, and overcame obstacles through creative problem-solving under pressure. On the New Horizon, Captain Morrison was conducting a routine defensive drill with his crew. It was standard procedure for any deep space mission to practice emergency responses, but the precision and speed of his crew's reactions were impressive even by military standards. "Emergency stations," Jake announced over the ship's communication system. "This is a drill. All crew to battle stations." The response was immediate and coordinated. Lisa Grant secured her engineering systems and prepared for damage control procedures. Danny Brooks locked down his navigation console and prepared for evasive maneuvers. Ben Parker activated encryption protocols and prepared for emergency communications. Amy Collins moved to the weapons control station and began powering up the ship's defensive systems. Dr. Ross secured her medical equipment and prepared for potential casualties. Ryan Hayes coordinated the overall defensive posture and prepared contingency plans. "All stations report ready," Ryan announced less than 2 minutes after the drill began. "Excellent response time," Jake said with satisfaction. "Reset to normal operations." Back on the Zelkari ship, Yexpol was observing the human drill through their monitoring systems and feeling a growing sense of dread. The humans had moved from normal operations to full combat readiness in less than 2 minutes. More disturbing, they had done it without any apparent stress or confusion. They practiced this regularly, he realized, analyzing their movement patterns and coordination. This isn't emergency training. This is routine maintenance of combat skills, he began, running more detailed simulations, assuming that the human exploration ship was actually a disguised military vessel. The results were even more concerning. If the New Horizon was representative of human military capabilities, then human warships would be virtually unstoppable by current galactic standards. The human approach to combat combined overwhelming firepower with tactical flexibility in ways that most species couldn't match. Their weapons were designed for maximum destructive effect, their armor was built to keep fighting despite heavy damage, and their crew training emphasized continuing the mission, even under extreme conditions. On the human ship, Amy was discussing tactical scenarios with Ryan during their off-duty time. It was the kind of professional conversation that military personnel often had, but their casual discussion of extreme violence was remarkable in its matter-of-fact tone. "If we were facing multiple hostiles, I'd recommend concentrating fire on the largest target first," Amy said, reviewing tactical displays on her personal tablet. "Take out their command vessel, and the others might withdraw." "Good thinking," Ryan replied. "But if withdrawal isn't an option, we'd need to be prepared for coordinated counterattacks. Human doctrine calls for rapid target switching to prevent enemy recovery." "Right. Keep them off balance, deny them time to organize effective responses. Hit hard, hit fast, and keep hitting until the threat is eliminated." Dr. Ross was passing by and overheard their conversation. "You two sound like you're planning a war." "Just staying sharp," Ryan explained. "Military training is like medical training. You practice the procedures so many times that you can perform them automatically under stress. The difference is that medical procedures save lives," Dr. Ross pointed out. "And military procedures protect the people we care about," Amy replied. "Same goal, different methods." Back on the Zephyr's edge, Yexapol was analyzing human military doctrine and finding strategic principles that were both brilliant and terrifying. The humans had developed the concept of escalation dominance, the idea that in any conflict, they should be prepared to use more force than their opponents could match. Their strategic thinking wasn't limited to individual battles or campaigns. They planned for long-term conflicts that could span generations, and they were willing to accept massive casualties if necessary to achieve strategic objectives. Most disturbing of all, they had developed contingency plans for scenarios that other species would consider unthinkable. "Total war," he whispered, reading through human historical analyses. "They're prepared to mobilize their entire civilization for warfare if they perceive an existential threat." The concept was almost incomprehensible to galactic military thinking. Most species fought limited wars for specific objectives with clearly defined goals and acceptable losses. The humans had demonstrated the willingness to commit every resource their civilization possessed to completely destroying enemies they considered dangerous. On the New Horizon, Jake was reviewing their current situation with his senior staff when Ben detected something new from the alien ship. "Captain, their energy output just spiked again. This time it looks like they're charging some kind of high-energy system." "Weapons?" Ryan asked immediately. "Could be. The power levels are consistent with military-grade equipment." Jake felt the familiar tension that came with potential combat situations. "All crew, maintain current positions but be ready for immediate response to hostile action. Do not activate weapons unless fired upon." Lisa was monitoring their own systems when she detected something concerning. "Captain, our reactor efficiency just improved automatically. The ship's computer is optimizing power distribution for combat operations." "I didn't order that," Jake said. "It's an automatic response to detected threats," Amy explained. "Human ships are designed to prepare for combat when sensors detect potential hostiles. The computer assumes we'll need maximum power for weapons and defensive systems." Back on the Zelkari vessel, Yexpol was running final combat simulations, and the results were catastrophic for galactic civilization. A single human military unit could potentially defeat multiple Zelkari ships through superior tactics, better training, and more effective use of available resources. But the real nightmare scenario involved human expansion. If the humans decided to claim territory beyond their current borders, their military advantages would make them virtually unstoppable. Their ability to function in hostile environments meant they could operate in systems that other species couldn't even visit. Their pack-bonding behavior meant they would fight with unit cohesion that exceeded anything in galactic military history. Their cultural emphasis on warfare meant they would use tactics that other species would consider war crimes. Their strategic thinking meant they would plan for conflicts that could last centuries. "Commander Vextal," he called through the communication system. "I have completed my military analysis of human capabilities." "What are your conclusions?" Vextal asked. "Sir, we are facing a species that represents an existential threat to galactic civilization. Their military capabilities exceed our own in every measurable category. Their strategic thinking is more advanced than anything we've encountered. Their willingness to use extreme force is beyond our current understanding." "Are you recommending military action?" "Sir, I'm recommending immediate withdrawal. We cannot defeat these humans through conventional warfare, and any attempt to do so would likely result in the complete destruction of Zelkari military forces." Yexpol paused, looking at his analysis summary with growing despair. "Commander, if the humans ever decide that we represent a threat to their civilization, they won't just defeat us in battle. They'll hunt down every Zelkari ship, occupy every Zelkari world, and eliminate our species as a potential future threat. That's not speculation. That's what their military doctrine calls for when facing dangerous enemies. And if we try to make peaceful contact? Sir, that might be our only option, but even then, we'd be negotiating from a position of complete military inferiority. The humans would hold all the advantages, and we'd have to hope that their concept of mercy extends to species that are capable of threatening them." Yexpol completed his final report with a sense of doom. The humans weren't just another spacefaring species. They were apex predators who... Fleet Commander Vextal sat in his command chair, reviewing the reports from his specialists with growing horror. Each analysis painted the same picture from a different angle. The humans represented a threat unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. They were apex predators from a death world, armed with weapons that could penetrate any known defense, organized into pack units with unbreakable loyalty, and guided by a military philosophy that emphasized total victory through overwhelming force. The data was clear, but the implications were almost too terrible to accept. The Zelkari had discovered a species that could potentially conquer the entire galaxy if they chose to do so. Worse, the humans appeared to be completely unaware of how terrifying they seemed to other species. They thought of themselves as peaceful explorers, not the walking nightmares that Zelkari analysis had revealed them to be. Vextal activated his communication system to contact Zelkari High Command. This information was too important to delay, even though he knew the response would likely be panic, followed by demands for immediate action. The question was whether that action should be a preemptive strike or complete avoidance. High Command, this is Fleet Commander Vexital reporting a Code 7 first contact situation, he transmitted, using the designation for species that posed existential threats to galactic civilization. On the New Horizon, Captain Morrison was becoming increasingly concerned about the alien ship's behavior. Hours had passed since initial contact. Multiple high-energy transmissions had been detected, and there had been no response to any of their communication attempts. The situation was starting to feel less like first contact and more like a potential threat assessment. Ben, any change in their communication status? Jake asked. Nothing, Captain. They're still ignoring our messages, but they're definitely talking to someone else. I've detected at least 4 separate transmissions to locations outside this system. Could be reporting our presence to their government, Dr. Ross suggested. That would be standard procedure for first contact. Or calling for military reinforcements, Amy added grimly. Their behavior pattern suggests they view us as a potential threat. Ryan was monitoring the tactical situation when he noticed something alarming. Captain, their ship has been slowly changing position over the past hour. They're not moving toward us, but they're definitely maneuvering for something. What kind of maneuvering? Jake asked. Best guess? They're positioning for rapid departure. Their current orientation would allow them to achieve maximum acceleration away from our position with minimal course correction time. Jake felt his command instincts activating. After years of deep space exploration, he had learned to trust his intuition about potentially dangerous situations. Something about the aliens' behavior felt wrong, and the prolonged silence was becoming ominous rather than cautious. Back on the Zephyr's edge, Vextal was receiving responses from Zelkari High Command that confirmed his worst fears. The initial panic had given way to demands for detailed intelligence about human military capabilities, population estimates, and potential territorial expansion plans. The Military Council was already discussing preemptive strike options. Fleet. Commander, you are ordered to maintain observation distance and continue intelligence gathering, came the reply from High Command. Military Analysis Division requires comprehensive data on human capabilities before determining response protocols. Vextal understood the logic, but he also understood the danger. Every moment they remained in the vicinity of the human ship increased the risk of detection. If the humans realized they were being observed and analyzed, their response might be immediate and overwhelming. Science Officer Kirillin, prepare all collected data for transmission to High Command, he ordered. Include detailed warnings about human capabilities and recommended response protocols. What should I recommend, Commander? Kirillin asked. Complete avoidance. These humans must never know we were here. On the human ship, Danny was running routine navigation checks when he detected something that made him pause. Captain, I'm seeing some unusual gravitational fluctuations in our vicinity. Could be natural phenomena, but the pattern seems artificial." "What kind of artificial?" Jake asked, moving to examine Danny's display. "Like something large is slowly changing position nearby. The gravitational effects are subtle, but they're definitely there." Lisa ran a quick sensor sweep and confirmed Danny's observations. "He's right, Captain. There's definitely something massive moving in our area, and it's not showing up on our visual sensors." Amy checked her tactical displays and found correlating data. "Captain, if I overlay Danny's gravitational readings with the energy signatures we've been detecting, it looks like that alien ship has been gradually moving away from us." "They're leaving?" Ben asked. "Either that, or they're getting into position for something we're not going to like," Ryan replied. Jake made a decision that would unknowingly save both species from a potentially catastrophic conflict. "All hands, prepare for immediate departure. Danny, plot a course back toward human space. If these aliens want to avoid contact, we'll respect their wishes." "Should we try one more communication attempt?" Ben asked. "No. If they wanted to talk, they would have responded by now. We don't want to appear aggressive or persistent. Set course for home." Back on the Zelkari ship, communication specialist. Texmore detected the human ship's preparation for departure and immediately reported to Commander Vextal. "Sir, the human vessel is powering up their engines and appears to be preparing to leave the system." "Are they moving toward us or away from us?" Vextal asked. "Away from us, Commander. Their course heading will take them back toward their origin system." Vextal felt a mixture of relief and continued anxiety. The humans were leaving, which eliminated the immediate threat of discovery, but they were also returning to their home territory with complete knowledge of Zelkari presence in this region of space. "Maintain monitoring until they reach jump distance," he ordered. "I want to confirm their departure before we take any action." On the New Horizon, the crew was efficiently preparing for departure while trying to make sense of their first contact experience. The alien encounter had been nothing like the scenarios they had trained for, and the lack of communication left many questions unanswered. "Do you think we did something wrong?" Danny asked as he programmed their departure trajectory. "I don't think so," Jake replied. "We followed standard first contact protocols, transmitted peaceful greetings, and avoided any aggressive actions. If they didn't want to communicate, that's their choice." Dr. Ross was considering the situation from a psychological perspective. "You know, they might have been just as nervous as we were. First contact is stressful for everyone involved, and they might have needed more time to decide how to respond. Or they might have decided we were too dangerous to talk to," Amy suggested. "Depending on their evolutionary background, humans might seem pretty intimidating." Lisa was monitoring their departure preparations when she noticed something interesting. "Captain, as we've been powering up our engines, the alien ship's energy output has been decreasing. It's like they're standing down from whatever they were preparing for." "Maybe they were getting ready for combat and decided it wasn't necessary," Ryan observed. Back on the Zephyr's edge, Vextal was making the most important decision of his career. The humans were leaving peacefully, which suggested they were not immediately aggressive toward unknown species, but their very existence represented a long-term threat that could not be ignored. "Helm, prepare for immediate departure once the human ship reaches jump distance," he ordered. "Set course for the nearest Zelkari outpost." "What about continuing observation?" asked Science Officer Kira Lynn. "Too dangerous. We have enough data to understand what we're dealing with, and the risk of discovery is too high." Vextal activated his communication system to record a message for Zelkari High Command. "This is Fleet Commander Vextal with final recommendations regarding the human species. Based on comprehensive analysis, I recommend that all Zelkari forces avoid the Sol system and surrounding regions indefinitely. The humans represent an existential threat to galactic civilization, but they appear to be peaceful unless provoked. He paused, considering the full implications of his words. The humans must never know that we observed them. Any attempt at military action against their species would likely result in complete retaliation that our civilization could not survive. Our only option is to hope that they remain focused on peaceful exploration and never decide that we represent a threat to their existence. On the New Horizon, Jake was making his final log entry about their first contact experience. Captain's log, supplemental. We have completed our encounter with an unidentified alien vessel. No communication was established despite multiple attempts using standard first contact protocols. The alien ship maintained observation distance for approximately 6 hours before both vessels departed the area peacefully. He paused, trying to capture his feelings about the experience. While this first contact did not proceed as expected, it represents an important milestone in human space exploration. We now know that intelligent alien life exists and that peaceful coexistence may be possible. I am recommending that future exploration missions include enhanced communication equipment and additional cult.